Hi there and welcome to Introduction to Alchemy. This is your 1-hour welcome seminar designed to give you a little bit of background, some wisdom, some insight into the process of spiritual transformation from my perspective, to dip your toe a little bit into the direction of the curriculum for next year, to kind of clarify and define for you what is alchemy and also what isn't alchemy, and to get you excited about what I think is going to be the richest year of content ever. And 2021 will be the 10th year of online programs at Sage Goddess. So this year is a big anniversary for us, and I think it's fantastic to celebrate that anniversary by bringing you the curriculum that I think has the greatest potential to really change your life from the inside out. And there's so many ways in which this year is different from previous years, but doesn't that make sense? I mean, 2020 has not been like, for me anyway, any other year of my life. I've had strange years, I've had easy years, I've had really challenging years. 2020 definitely stacks up as one of the more challenging years. But I will tell you this, I spent 2020 getting ready for alchemy with you. I spent it working with different teachers in my own personal training and process. I spent it healing some early childhood issues and trauma that I really wanted to test with the work that we're doing this year. Could I alchemize that? And I'm going to tell you something, I did it. And one of the reasons I'm really proud of myself in 2020 is that during a really challenging year, I undertook a course of study designed to shift a lot of different energies in my life for the better. And I was able to test a lot of the theories and the processes and the structure of what I had planned for you for 2021 on myself and see what worked, what didn't work, what I liked, what I didn't like. And so what I'm bringing to you this year in Soul Shift Alchemize is really, at least from my perspective, the clearest, most direct, and most effective pathway to spiritual transformation that you can take. And so I hope you're excited, and I'm excited to be here with you for the next hour, so enjoy this. This is just a free gift, just to barely scratch the surface so that we all come into this class together working with the same assumptions, understanding the same basic terms and structure, and also helping you to understand why I think this is such an important curriculum for now. And then the rest will be revealed over time as we go through class. So let's begin at the beginning, shall we? I do have notes for this class, just because there's a lot that's technical, and there's also a lot I don't want to forget. So you'll see me occasionally looking down at my notes just to sort of track through and make sure I don't miss anything. I have a total of about 7 pages of notes for this hour. I don't think I'll get through all of them, but that's okay. Whatever I don't walk through in this hour with you, I will incorporate into our curriculum so you won't miss a beat. And I do want to say too, before we start, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being in my life. Thank you for doing your work. When you do your work, you heal everybody around you. Everyone who raises their vibration. And that's, to me, we're going to talk about definitions of alchemy right now, and I'm going to share a few with you. But one of the definitions of alchemy is learning how to raise your vibration and direct your will in alignment with your intention and your purpose. Learning how to raise your vibration and direct it in alignment with your intention and your purpose. So alchemy is really the process of saying, I want to achieve this. Like for me this year, I really wanted to heal around some issues I had from middle school. And you might say, middle school? And it was bullying stuff. You might say, well, why? She's almost 50 years old. She's still dealing with that? You know what? I was. I don't know how to tell you, I just was. And so I finally was like, I really want to see if I can shift those energies. And the process of alchemy, here's why it's different than everything else. I think all energy is neutral until we assign it a value or a property. We say that's a high vibration, that's a low vibration, whatever. I think a lot of it we decide. And what that means is all energy is usable. This is one of the fundamental principles of alchemy. Your anger is usable, right? It's workable. It's energy. It's neutral, actually. But we, through our actions and our identification and our labeling, we assign it a value or a property, right? So that's anger. No, that's energy. I've chosen to express it in the form of anger. But I can also, as a conscious sentient being with intention and will, I can also choose to open or to access that energy field with a different intention, which is fundamentally going to shift the nature of that energy. And what that means is you come to a place in your life through alchemy, or at least I have, especially this year, where you reject nothing. Because you ultimately come to see that however you perceive things to be is that. It's a perception. You know, did you see 2020 as a nightmare or as a blessing? Well, I'm just saying, it's neutral in a way. And then your experience of it and how you talk about it and how you frame it and how you think about it determines what it is for you. Because the reality is, in your world, there's only one perspective, and that's yours, right? Everybody around you who has different perspectives than you, they're just mirroring you back to you, right? So those other perspectives, those other beliefs, those other experiences, those are reflections of other possibilities around you. So some people have seen this year as just an absolute disaster, and in their experience that may have well been true. Some people have seen this year as an absolute blessing. They've had more time with their family. Well, for them and their experience, that can also be true. And so what we learn over time, and what I've learned in doing this work over all these decades, is reality is shaped through our experience of it, and through our labeling of it, and through our understanding of it, and through our capacity to see that in any moment we can transform and shift reality by shifting our perspective on it. And that's magic. That's alchemy. So in a nutshell, that's really what we're talking about. This year, I'm going to take you on kind of a magic carpet ride, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a taste of that right now, just to kind of get us started, and then we will do much more of this, especially in session 1, as I kind of lay the foundations for you. Alchemy takes us back to what's known historically as the Zeptepi. The Zeptepi means origin or genesis. It takes us back to the origin of our planet. Where did we come from? Who are we? Why are we here? When did we come in? Where did we come from? Alchemy takes us back to all of those conversations. The word alchemy, A-L-C-H-E-M-Y, comes from 2 Arabic words, al-Kemet or Chemet. And al-Kemet means from Egypt. And in fact, if you look at, and even if you look up like on Wikipedia, if you look up chemistry, right, like modern chemistry, classes you took in college. I took inorganic and organic chemistry in college because I, believe it or not, at the beginning of my college journey, I was pre-med. I wanted to be a doctor. I came to my senses. I still became a doctor, but I became a PhD instead of an MD. It was the right choice for me. I don't think I was meant to be a medical doctor, but I was meant to be a doctor. But anyway, so I was in all of these chemistry classes. If you look up the origin, the root of the word chemistry, it's the same root as alchemy, C-H-E-M, which originates in Arabic as K-M, K-E-M, not C-H-E-M. And Kemet is from Egypt. Math comes from Egypt, chemistry comes from Egypt, alchemy comes from Egypt. And some scholars debate, and I will tell you, even when I was an undergraduate at UC Irvine, I was studying the history of Western civilization. They had a speaker come and talk to us. This was back in 1994-ish when this speaker came. And the speaker had written a book called Black Athena. And it was this whole idea that that Africa is the continent of origin of our civilizations and our species. And most of us believe this to be true. So everything takes us back to Kemet, right? Everything takes us back to Egypt and to these fertile lands that grew along the Nile River. And in ancient Egypt, if the land was fertile and the river was high, then it was a good year. That was a prosperous, good thing. If the land was not fertile, if the water did not rise, then humans did something wrong, or the gods weren't happy. It was not a good year. Everything came back to the Nile in ancient Egypt in terms of like, did we have a good year? Or did we please the gods, not please the gods? Everything came back to the Nile. Okay. There was a temple in Egypt called Hormenuthi. And we'll talk more about this in session 1. As the legends go, Isis herself was an initiate in these temples, these early temples, going back to the Zep-Tepi and the origins of civilization. And it'll be fun, I think, because we've been working with Isis in Soul Shift this last year, especially at the end of the year. December was really a focus on Isis and Osiris and this concept of embodiment of magic. And so it'll be a familiar, it's actually a nice segue to introduce you, because Isis figures into the history of alchemy in the world. So what is alchemy? We know where it comes from. We know it comes from Egypt. And why is that? Well, quick story on that. Lemuria was over here. West, okay? Pretend this is west. I know it looks like it's to the right, but I'm pointing to the left. Lemuria existed, the continent of Mu, the mother continent, existed where Hawaii is today, right? But it was much bigger than Hawaii. It extended all the way to the west coast of the United States. That's why Shasta in California is sort of involved. And then it extended all the way down to the Indian Ocean, which if you look at a map, I mean, that's a big old mass, right? So that was a Western origin civilization, Lemuria. The Eastern origin civilization was Atlantis, right off the coast of the eastern coast of the US, extending down. Well, that Atlantean civilization, when that fell, both of the civilizations fell. Lemuria fell, Atlantis fell. And when they fell, the inhabitants of those civilizations fled to different parts of the world. The Lemurian inhabitants fled to Western regional locations, which would have taken them to North America and also to Central and South America, which is where we end up with our Lemurian crystals, right, coming out of Minas Gerais and Brazil, and some vestiges of Lemurian magic also being documented in Argentina. So there's a whole lineage there. With alchemy, we're really focusing on Atlantis. So when Atlantis fell, the theory is that Thoth, Thoth, who's known by other names, right? He's known in the Roman pantheon as Mercury. He's known in the Greek pantheon as Hermes. He's always known as a messenger god and a communication god. Sometimes as a trickster, right? Also known as sort of a father of expression, a father of medicine. I mean, there's all these like legends, and they're all bound up in this notion of what is alchemy. So Thoth was a high priest in Atlantis. When Atlantis fell, fled to Egypt. And that's where he established the hieroglyphics. He's the father of hieroglyphics, and that's well established and documented. Thoth is a hybrid god, half ibis, half bird, half human. And then Thoth evolved and morphed into these other identities that crossed into modern traditional civilizations like Rome and Greece, which we don't have a legacy and a lineage and a documentation of Atlantis. So when we're dealing with people who want proof, it's kind of tricky. And so Thoth becomes, because he traversed both the Atlantean civilization and the Greek and Roman civilization under these different names, because Thoth equals Hermes, he equals Mercury, right? That becomes what we call Hermes Trismegistus, or Hermes thrice great. Hermes has different faces, and that's because Hermes ultimately came from Egypt, Al-Kemet, and became the father of modern alchemy. I think it's one of the reasons I love Momo so much. His company is called Mercurius Designs. And the legend is that Mercury and Hermes, by the way, both of them in their traditions, right, again, Mercury is Roman and Hermes is Greek, received a magic wand from Apollo, right? Apollo is the one who is responsible for the oracle at Delphi, right? The legend is he gave each of them a magic wand. And that wand attracted the snakes that wound around it and became the caduceus, which now is the symbol of modern medicine. So Thoth is in many ways also the father of modern medicine, and so is alchemy. Alchemy is the origin story both of magic and of medicine. And I don't know about you, and maybe it's because I come out of academic training, right? And maybe it's because I work with MDs and I work with and also, sort of non-traditional holistic medical practitioners too. I think we see the connection. I think at its best, medicine acknowledges the reality of science and data and being able to replicate studies and controlled experiments and laboratory settings. But then there's always part of healing that is magic, that you can't put your finger on. And most of my MD friends who are open-minded will say half of the equation in medicine is the medicine, and half of the equation in medicine is the will and the desire of the person to change and get better and believe that that's possible. You know, and I've had so many MDs tell me, if I give someone medicine, that gets them, you know, half to 3/4 of the way there. If that person does not believe in their heart, mind, and spirit that they can get better and heal, then no matter how many medicines I give them, they may not recover. And that's alchemy. Alchemy is the distance between what we can prove and what we can't. It's the space between. It's the liminal space, right? It's the not here, but also not there. It's the thing you can't put your finger on, and yet you know it's real and it's true. And so this year, my goal is to give you as much hard evidence of alchemy and as much of a process and an origin story so that you can feel confident that you, once and for all, kind of understand, first of all, where you came from, why you're here. In January, we're gonna be looking at your lineage, your physical lineage, your family lineage, your family tree, but also your star lineage. Which one of these star systems did you come from, and why? And which one of these mother civilizations brought you here? Was it Lemuria or Atlantis? I think most of us came here originally in one of those two civilizations, and they're very different. They have different purposes, they have different focus, the people who were Atlantean had a different set of worldviews and skill sets than the people who were Lemurian. And I don't attach a value to it. I think they were both, had the potential for positive and negative experiences and contributions, but they were both very important in the evolution story of our planet and our civilization. So we're gonna cover all that this year. Okay, so alchemy was originally designed, and I'm sure you probably know this if you've read or looked into the subject, it was originally designed to teach people how to take a metal like tin and transform it into gold. The focus of alchemy in the physical sense is to try to produce as much gold as we can. Why is that? Well, my theory is that gold is actually the reason why this planet was chosen for colonization originally. There's lots of planets in the solar system, but Earth has the highest proportion of gold in its mantle and crust of any other planet. And I've said this to you before, you know, I think it's funny, even today we have shows like Gold Rush, you know, my husband loves it, where it's like, how much gold are they going to get, and was it enough for the season, and did they have the right machinery, and where is it look in the right place for the gold? Why are we still obsessed with gold? Well, the theory is that the Anunnaki, who were the first human inhabitants of this planet, humanoid inhabitants of this planet, because we don't really know if they were human or not, they were probably some evolutionary sort of hybrid, came here because they were in trouble and they needed gold to survive. And so they did a scan of all the planets in the solar system. They found out that gold had this high proportion of, or Earth had this high proportion of gold. Okay, great, we'll go colonize Earth. Then they established this sort of race of beings to help them get gold out of the Earth, and they realized it's actually really hard to mine gold. So they ended up establishing a broader set of humans to mine this gold for them, and that, in some people's view, is really actually the origin story of human evolution on this planet. There was a original magical evolution on this planet, but ultimately the human race was created as a sort of support team to be able to mine this gold efficiently and get enough of it in the hands of the Anunnaki that they could perpetuate their own civilization. And so it went through way past these origin times to modern times, right? I mean, the quest for the Philosopher's Stone and the quest to understand how do we take tin or nickel and through some kind of crucible, right, through by heating it or by adding elements to it or shifting its state, we transform these relatively worthless metals into gold, which is considered to be the most valuable, right? And so that was, in many people's eyes, the beginning of alchemy. If we understand the right process, we can take anything and make it into gold. But the reason I was always unsatisfied with that answer, and you may have been too, is it's like, okay, I get that, but why gold? I mean, why this constant and almost endless quest that persists to today to find more gold, mine more gold, source more gold, do it more effectively, do it more affordably, do it with different machinery, different equipment. I would say in many ways we're still stuck in that sort of early phase of being in search and rescue mode for gold. Okay, now there was always an element of alchemy that had nothing to do with gold, right? There was always this idea that through this process of transformation, you take something, heat it, it changes, right? You take something, you add some elements, you take some away, it changes, right? That is fundamentally what alchemy is. And so this year, I just want to reinforce to you, this is not, I'm not teaching you how to take tin and make gold. That's not what you're signing up for here, okay? But I am going to be training you how to do that in a spiritual way. Instead of tin, think about it as grief. You know, how do we transform grief into peace? Again, if all energy is neutral, we can identify an energy that we want to shift, and under the right conditions and with the right perspective and the right process, we can transform any emotion, experience, state of being into another. How do we take a body that's ill and transform that into a body that's strong and productive and healthy and free of pain? If you believe in the principles of alchemy, then by extension you have to believe in their applicability, and that almost nothing is off limits when it comes to what can be changed. I have seen in my own life that everything can be changed. Marriages can be healed and improved, or they can be destroyed, right? I mean, it all comes down to intention. When people say, can I save my marriage? I'm always like, do you want to save your marriage? Can I improve my health? Do you want to improve your health? You know, some people, I know it sounds crazy, but some people don't want to improve their health because they get a lot of pity and a lot of, oh, I'm so sorry, that's so sad, it must be so hard for you. And for some people, that's a benefit. That's a perk. They're like, well, if I got well, nobody would say those things to me anymore. So it's part desire and part intention, and then it's about figuring out the right process and the steps. And so what I've done this year is I've taken the 7 steps of physical alchemy that they used to use in a laboratory to transform base metals into gold. I've taken those 7 steps and I've applied them in a spiritual context. So that we're not talking about iron or tin or, you know, nickel and gold. We're talking about grief to peace and joy. We're talking about illness to wellness. We're talking about fear into confidence and strength, right? This is the kind of alchemy that I'm looking at this year. And one of the things I really want you to consider as we come into the space, just like I had to do this myself going into my own work in 2020. So again, everything I'm telling you right now, I just did it. And I know it's hard. So some parts of this process, you're going to be like, this is easy. She said this was going to be hard. And then some parts you're going to be like, I can't do this. So I'm just saying, when it seems really easy, enjoy it, right? And when it seems really hard, just remember it is possible. But as with all things, if it was super, super easy and you didn't have to push past anything or struggle once in a while, everybody would do it. In fact, it would just be instantaneous. The reason that most people don't change is that change is challenging. It requires discipline and focus and will and a knowledge of these arts and techniques. And so you'll have the tools this year, but what I can't provide to you is your desire and your focus and your will. The other thing I want to say really quickly on this note is I think it's really important to complete all of Soul Shift this year. And I'll tell you why. If you stop midway, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end this year to our curriculum. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end in alchemy. You know, you start with the original state of whatever it is, you get into the nitty-gritty of the change process, and then you end up with your final result or outcome. If you stop the process in the middle, you never get the fruition, the benefit, the completion, the manifestation of the final stages. And that's the goal. That's the payoff where you go, oh my God, I did that. It wasn't that hard. But you have to work through the middle phase. So what I'll say is I really want to encourage you to start the process and to see it through. And I also want to encourage you to pace yourself this year. Some people start, you know, they just come in hot, right? They're just, I'm going to do everything. I'm going to do it twice. I'm going to listen to every class. I'm going to watch every class 5 times. I'm going to take all my own notes. I'm going to do this, do that. Pace yourself and take your time. You know what I mean? I'd rather see you be consistent and even in your approach to this and take your time. Maybe take breaks here and there when it feels intense for you. Then see you come in hot and all excited, and then midway through you're like, I'm tired, I can't keep up. So pace yourself with the intention of completing the entire cycle. Because that's when, you know, there's so much in alchemy that you only see when you see it, you know? I really only saw the reward of all of my work this year starting in November. And I started my work in February of this year, again, to heal some of those older wounds. And there was a time where I'm like, I don't know if this is working. You know, around like May, June, I was just like, I don't know. Because I was still seeing myself react to things the same way as I used to. And I was like, I don't know if, like, internally, you know. And finally by October or November, I remember I had 1 or 2 experiences where I was like light bulb moments, where I remember going to Dave and going, I can't believe this, but like, I've actually shifted this. And him saying, you know, it's about time. I mean, you know, a lot of the stuff that I was working through this year happened when I was 11 and 12 years old. Well, I'm 47. I mean, if I'm going to do the work, is there some other better time to do it? You know, maybe when I'm 60. I mean, I don't want to deal with these things anymore. So at a certain point, what's going to propel you, I think, through the year and keep you motivated is you just having enough of going through the same experiences over and over again, facing the same challenges over and over again, and approaching them from the same perspective and getting the same result, where you're just like, I don't want to keep doing this anymore. And so once you get to that point, that's how you know you're really ready for this. But there will be moments along the way this year where you're like, I'm not sure I see it, or I'm not sure I can keep doing this, or it's too hard, or I don't want to dig this deep. And what I'm just going to remind you, and I'll remind you if you get to that place too, is keep going, because the payoff is usually right after that. And then you're like, oh my God, I did it. Like, it's almost like a light goes on, and it goes on differently for different people at different times. Okay. So we defined alchemy that way as the process of learning how to raise your vibration, direct your will, and shift outcomes. I mean, that's ultimately what alchemy is. It's also the process of changing something from a lower state of vibration to a higher state of vibration and learning how to maintain that vibrational level. So those are additional definitions. Alchemy is also a rebirthing process. It really, truly is. And alchemy, I also consider to be like the behind the scenes of magic. I've never met any real, powerful, magical people who don't do everything I'm about to teach you in this class. Now, some of them do it subconsciously. They may not know the names of the 7 stages and stuff, so they're not literally physically practicing alchemy. But they've learned about transmutation. They've learned how to raise, elevate, sustain a vibration. They've learned how to direct their will towards specific outcomes. And they've learned how to manage change and how to go through a transformation process and come out the other side better and stronger for it. All manifestors, all people who manifest successfully in their life, they're all alchemists. And again, they may not know the word. They may be like, what? What's an alchemist? But then if you say, well, this is what an alchemist does. They transform things from one state to another using magic. They focus their will and their desire toward a specific outcome. And then they learn how to raise and maintain that vibration until that outcome is reached. They'd be like, oh, well, I do that. So a lot of people do this. They just don't know what the name of it is. If it's a subconscious process for you, though, alchemy, like if you know that you do it, but you're not sure how or why, I want it to become conscious for you this year. It shouldn't be an unconscious or subconscious process. In my mind, you get powerful when you start to realize this is what I do, this is how I do it, and this is why I do it this way. So that when you face a challenge, because the reality is you're human, and as long as you're in this body, you're going to face challenges, right? I mean, multiple challenges a day sometimes, right? So what I want to give you this year is for you to have now this manual. So you say, okay, I'm facing a challenge. 7 stages. Ready, go. We're going to put it through the first stage, the second stage, the third stage, the fourth stage, the fifth stage, the sixth, seventh stage. And on the other side of that, we're going to have a different perspective, a different lens, and a different way of engaging with that issue. That's what I want you to have. So that, and these stages are portable, right? And as this becomes kind of muscle memory for you, as you learn this process, and it just becomes sort of part of who you are and part of how you move through your life and your relationships, you won't even need your notes anymore. It's just like, okay, so the work begins. So I'm going to walk you at a high level through those stages tonight, briefly, and then, like I said, each month. So most of the months of the year, we're going to spend 2 months on stages. January, February, March and April, May and June. Toward the end of the year, the final stages, we'll spend 1 month. And because those are sort of cleanup stages. And so I'll share more about that with you in just a second. Okay, alchemy is also about discipline and focus, ethos, if you will, how you approach situations. And that's why I'm mentioning to you about really this year making a commitment to stay the course, because it is a process. Sometimes when I teach you things, they're not stage gated like this. But like I say, the middle stages are where everything is kind of, it's kind of like taking a class on how to untangle necklaces and leaving the class while the necklace is still in a bunch of knots. It's like, but you didn't get to see what the necklace looks like without the knots. So that's why discipline and focus and tenacity really comes into play as well. Okay. The other thing I wanted to tell you too, because I find this interesting, every single, at least as far as I can see, every single spiritual path and tradition has an alchemical component. To some extent, even the crucifixion of Christ is alchemical, right? He changed forms, right? He was crucified as a human and was reborn as the right hand of God, right? And he was reborn as a figure who could then be a source of redemption for you, because he had done his own alchemy. He could be a representative of that alchemical process for others and actually be a conduit of that alchemical process. Does that make sense? And so this is why I love alchemy too. Scientists understand alchemy. It's chemistry. It's, you take this material, you heat it up in a laboratory setting, you're going to produce this. You're going to have this chemical reaction. So scientists understand it. Christians understand it. Like I said, almost every tradition has some origin story or some narrative embedded within it that represents the transformation of states from one state to another. Okay. Now, where does alchemy begin? Alchemy begins with what we call the prima materia. Prima in Latin means first, and materia means matter. So the prima materia is the first matter. It's what the, in some traditions is known as, the Hindu tradition is known as the Brahman, right? It's sort of it's the universal life force energy. It's the place where we begin. It's the point of departure. And in many ways, your life today is your prima materia. And that's one of the things I love about alchemy. It meets you where you are. If you're working with a client and you're doing alchemical work with them, they don't have to fix themselves before they start working with you. They know that they should probably come to you as the prima materia in their primal state in that moment. And that's where the work begins. So it's not contrived, it's not artificial, there's no putting on a show. It's like, okay, well, this is where you are. We're going to meet you where you are and then take you where you want to be. So we go from the prima materia, the first matter, and by the end of the process, we have what's known as the magnum opus, the great work. So we start with nothing and we create something. And that's why I'm saying there's so many connections between manifestation and alchemy, because manifestation really is this process of taking nothing, right, and creating something from it. And that's the ultimate form of magic. Alchemy seeks the essence of everything. And one of the mantras of alchemy is know thyself. And I really want you to sit with that for a minute. A lot of us who are in our late 40s, 50s, 60s, we know that that's true. You become a magician in the fullest sense of the word in your life when you begin to know who you are and who you're not, right? This is who I am, this is who I'm not. This is what I know how to do, that's not something I know how to do. These are my gifts, those aren't my gifts. And we begin to sort of understand our challenges and our blessings at the same time. The goal this year is to come to the essence of you. And in that way, as we start to kind of take your tangled necklace apart, right? As we take the tweezers and start to kind of find out where the knots are and pull them out a little bit and see what's in there. Because sometimes you ever had a necklace that's really knotted and you think, I will never get that necklace unknotted. And then you start kind of pulling it apart and it turns out it was really easy. Have you had that experience and you're like, I should have done this a long time ago? That's kind of how alchemy is too. Sometimes you look at certain times in your life, like if you had trauma when you were a child, you're like, well, that I'll never be able to untangle. And one of the things I've learned about alchemy is it's all untangleable. There are no tangles in your necklace that with the right attention and tweezing and fine tuning and detail, focus work, when you put your readers on and you really get in there, there are no tangles in you that can't be unknotted. And the unknotting is what ultimately relieves the contraction, as we call it in shamanic terms, and then that leads to health and recovery and wellness and pain relief and all the things that a lot of us are seeking. Joy. Okay. Alchemy dates back, by the way, at least 2,000 years before the time of Christ. I would make the case that it's much older than that, but that is really, like, for documented, where we can point and say that I know to be true, you're looking at about 2000 BC for the start of alchemy. This practice, this process in all its forms was rejected by the church, and alchemists were seen as sorcerers. They were in some cases condemned for this work, and so that's when the spiritual side of alchemy really went into hiding. And through the Renaissance period and the rise of the Industrial Revolution and so forth, you see a focus on science and less of a focus on magic. And you see people sort of hiding magic. That's when we start to call magic the occult, right? The occult comes from the same Latin root word as occluded, meaning hidden, right? So some of this stuff had to go out of the main view of society, had to be done behind closed doors, had to be done under the guise of, no, I'm not doing spiritual work, I'm just taking tin and trying to make gold over here, nothing to see, right? But again, we know that even in those cases, people were doing it. Do you know who brought spiritual alchemy back to the forefront without condemnation or rejection? It was Carl Jung. It's really modern psychoanalysis that gave alchemy a new lease on life. And so we credit Carl Jung and modern psychoanalysis more generally. You know, Jung is really the father of even the Myers-Briggs system. He's the concept creator behind these archetypes in the Myers-Briggs typology. If you're familiar with that, I taught that a few years ago in a class called Of Light and Shadow that people really enjoyed. And you can always go back and take that class, by the way, on pay-per-view. It's actually great training for this program. It's not required, but a lot of people in my classes now were students of Light and Shadow back in the day. So in any case, and Carl Jung understood this to be true as well. And this is where the concept of the shadow comes from. This is where the concepts of the anima and the animus, right? The idea that we have duality within us, that we are feminine and masculine all at the same time, no matter what physical organs we have, that every single human form is a duality inherently between masculine and feminine. And you can be physically feminine but be highly masculine as a soul or an essence, and the reverse can also be true. True alchemy is mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. It covers all four domains. For the first time this year, in a more focused way, we are going to be talking about your body. We will be talking about movement and exercise and what you're eating and how you're eating, and the alchemy of your physicality. Because what I also know to be true is that if you're doing intense spiritual work and you don't see evidence of it on the outside, the fire may not be burning brightly enough. True internal alchemy shows up externally. And this is why, I mean, and I'm proud of it. You know, if you look back to my early videos on YouTube back from 2010, 2011, a lot of people write in and they're like, is that really her? You know, like, that was 10 years ago, and people are like, you know, I think you look healthier today. I think you look more vibrant today. I think you look more authentic and alive and happy. And the reality is all of that is true. When I first started Sage Goddess, I was still moving out of a profession that wasn't fully in alignment with who I was and why I was here. I think I got the training I needed, but I wasn't practicing it in the most accurate domain. In the way that I think that I am now through Soul Shift and Crystal Masters. I really think this is the reason I'm here. And I think once you figure out why you're here and what you're supposed to be doing, and you live into that, that's what I'm saying. I think the internal vibration and the alignment that happens between who you are and what you do and what you believe and how you behave and how you engage with other people, when that starts to really line up, I do think it has an impact too on your physical wellness, on your physical appearance, on your physical sense of comfort or not. And so we are going to be talking about the body this year as well. Now, I do want to talk briefly about alchemy and the elements. We are going to be talking about elements quite a lot this year. There was a question about, because we're going to have these what are called activation ceremonies. And so when we turn seasons this year, from winter to spring, from spring to summer, from summer to fall, and from fall back to winter, we are aligning largely to the Northern Hemispheric calendar, right? Meaning I'm in Los Angeles, California. I'm in the Northern Hemisphere. Tonight, is, whatever it is in the North. In terms of the wheel of the year, the opposite holidays are happening. Like right now, this is Yule time in the Northern Hemisphere. In the Southern Hemisphere, they're turning from spring to summer. And so we always have this yin-yang energy between the Northern and Southern Hemispheres. I will be including information for those who are celebrating the opposite hemispheres calendar. And so I do think that it will still be a valuable exercise to be in this program if you are not in the same hemisphere as I am. And we'll be because we're going to be talking about the elements. Now, the elements are not figuring into everything that we do. They're really the focus of these quarterly activation ceremonies. That's when we're really going to be diving deep. And so in those activation ceremonies, I will be incorporating lessons, teachings, practices to help those who are celebrating and honoring the opposite holiday and tradition, to help them feel included and present in our work together as well. So because the elements are so woven into alchemical understandings, and not just the holidays, I'm just talking earth, air, fire, water, and spirit or ether, because the alchemists had to decide how to shift things. And each one of the elements is so powerful. Water can transform, it can create, or it can destroy. Fire is powerful, it can create, it can destroy. And so each one of the elements has this capacity to either create or to destroy based on how it's being used and what kind of transformation you're trying to create. The fifth element, sometimes known in alchemical language as the quintessence, right? Quint takes us back to the word for five. It's in alchemy, the element of spirit is understood as a way of holding space for what is unknown. The fifth spirit of element or ether, or the fifth element of spirit or ether, is a way of saying there's still something we can't explain. Whether you call that God or source or Brahman or the breath of the universe or the fingerprint of creation or the flower of life, there's something else there that we can't quite put our finger on. We can't come up with a recipe for it. We can't articulate how it works, but we know that there's some other magic in the mix that can't be accounted for by earth, air, fire, and water. Now, when we go back to the original references to the elements, we go back to the 6th century BC in ancient Greece, where we have Xenophanes, who added the element of earth to the original origin story of the elements. That said in the 5th and 6th century that all comes from water. That was the original elemental teaching. And even today, when they talk about other planets and could there be life on other planets, what's the first thing we always say? Well, if there's water, there can be life, right? That is one of the building blocks of life. And so we start with water as the original element. Xenophanes added earth right around the 5th century BC. Heraclitus added fire, again, in this like 4th, 5th century BC. Empedocles added the eternal element to include air. So now we have 4 elements. We start with water, then earth, then fire, then air. And these philosophers, Xenophanes and Heraclitus, believed that change happened through the rearrangement of these elements. More water, less air. More air, less fire. And so that's originally what alchemy was thought to be. It's almost like learning how to cook and balancing the amount of ingredients. Not too much salt here, need a little bit more garlic there. And so these were their building blocks of how change was created. They considered ether, especially Aristotle among the ancient Greeks, considered ether to be the building block of the heavens. And I love that way of framing it and thinking about it, that ether or spirit was the building block of the heavens. Okay. So let's talk, like I said, this is just kind of high level, and I'm trying to give you a little bit of everything just to kind of get your feet wet. And then, of course, all of this we will double click on once we get into the meat and potatoes of the class this year. So what are the 7 stages, if you will, of alchemy? So what I did to create this program for you, it took quite a long time. There are 7 codified stages of alchemy: calcination, dissolution, separation, conjunction, fermentation, distillation, and coagulation. You do not need to remember that. There will not be a quiz. However, there's 7 stages in 12 months. So what I decided to do was take January and February and focus on calcination, the first stage. And each month I am redefining these stages for you. So I'm still going to tell you, well, this stage was called calcination among the original alchemists, because I do want you to know what the proper names for the phases are. I do want you to know what the phases actually represented in material physical alchemy, even though we're talking more spiritual this year. So January and February we're spending on the first principle, calcination, which I'll talk to you more about in just a second. March and April we're going into the second stage, dissolution. May and June, we're going into the third stage, separation. July and August, we're going to the fourth stage, conjunction. September, October, we go into the fifth stage, fermentation. And then November, we go into the sixth stage, distillation. And in December, we go into the seventh stage, which is coagulation. And that's the final stage, when everything becomes embodied, all of the elements fully active and present in their appropriate proportions to create the kind of change that you want to activate. So that's why I'm saying this is really a 12-month curriculum. And let's say you came in and you're like, well, in May, you're like, this is too hard. You'll only have made it through 3 of the 7 stages. So more than half of the process will be ahead of you. And that's why I say, I really, to get the full benefit of this experience, I think you have to commit to the entirety of the experience. And I hope to make it as fun and enjoyable and rewarding for you along the way that you feel that you can make that ongoing commitment. Okay, number 1, calcination. This is the reduction. Actually, the word calcination, the root word, means reduce it to the bone. Okay, calcination is the process of taking something down to its core elements. So when we say take something down to the bone, I mean, it's almost like it's like cremation, right? You burn away everything that isn't core to the essence of what you're looking at. And so our interpretation of calcination for January, for example, is taking you down to your family trees, your spiritual family tree, your physical family tree, and your mother civilization family tree, Lemuria or Atlantis. And this is a process really of coming to figure out, who am I? As an alchemy, as a coagulation of factors in your life, where you came from, who you are today, the family members around you, who you've been told you are, the titles that you have, the degrees that you've earned, the job that you have today. Now, we all know none of those things is really who you are, right? Those are like little badges that you wear, like, hi, my name is Athena, but like, I'm not really Athena, right? That's not the absolute essence of who I am. The absolute essence of who I am ultimately is the soul that has incarnated under this name at this time in this family with these crazy people I live with. But that isn't like the core and essence of who I am. The core and essence of who I am is much bigger. And so we started in January with an effort to try to figure that out. Calcination is not a one-time thing. It's not like, well, I calcinated, so now I'm good. We may, during the course of the year, have to go back and recalcinate. We may have to go back and say, okay, so something new comes up, right? You run into a new challenge, or you start a new relationship, and all of a sudden you have to go back down and like rediscover some parts of that essence again. Or like me this year, I mean, I've been engaged in spiritual transformation processes since I was in a really intense way since I was about 17 years old. 30 years later, I still have work to do. And so this year I had to go back and completely burn that middle school experience down once and for all, and really just look at the bones. Like, I had to just say, okay, once and for all, I'm going to sort this out. And so that's what calcination is. It's the first stage of just saying, without fear and hesitation, just saying, I'm ready to look at it. I'm ready to burn away everything that isn't this, which includes my assumptions, my fears, the stories I've made up in my mind about it, the stories other people have told me about it, what happened at the time, my childhood experience of it, and burning all of that away. So we're going to spend 2 months on the calcination stage. And part of the process of calcination for us is going to be separating who you are from everyone around you. You know, so many of us say, well, I'm his mom, and I'm his wife, and I'm their teacher, and I'm, you know, their boss, and it's like, yeah, but who are you? Other than their mom and their teacher and his partner or her partner, that still doesn't tell me who you are. And for some people, this can be kind of scary. I mean, for me, I've always been asking these questions, but if this is new for you, you might go, well, I don't know. I mean, without all those things, and I'm not saying you let go of those things. This is actually a program designed to strengthen your relationships, not to separate you from them. So I don't want you to listen to me and go, oh my God, she's going to make me let go of all my relationships, and like, maybe she doesn't want me to be married anymore. It's nothing like that. My goal actually is at the end of this process for you to have a happier relationship. If you're in a relationship already, for you to be a better parent, happier parent, more integrated, you know, employer, somebody who's a better boss to work for, or a better employee to manage. So my goal is for you to examine things, not to actually separate yourself from them, but to be able to learn to understand, to begin to understand, who am I if we take all these things away? And that's what leads us back to some of our personal origin stories. The second stage is really a process of through dissolution, which is the name of the second stage. Dissolution is a process of coming to understand not just who you are separate from everything around you that you think defines you, but what programs are running your computer, subconsciously or unconsciously even. This is where we start to break down, and in traditional alchemy, it is said that the dissolution phase, this second phase, creates what's called the elixir, which is the root word, just like alchemet is the root word of alchemy, elixir, which means from the ashes. Al in Arabic means from. From the ashes, elixir, is how you rise. There's a phoenix energy in this second stage of dissolution. And that's why your perfumes this year are called elixirs, by the way, because, and this is the first elixir for January. And it's heavenly. This is why I've made you these liquid perfumes this year. We will be making perfume. There'll be a separate little kit of essential oils if you want to make perfume with me this year. But each month you're going to get your elixir, which is designed to, through that scent experience, to take you back and to help you to rise from the ashes, so that some new part of you emerges fresh from these experiences each month. In this second phase is when we start to look at the shadow. And so we are going to be doing shadow work this year. It is going to be earlier than usual. We're going to be starting it in March and April, because the goal of the third phase is to be able to let go of what isn't serving you. That's the goal of the separation phase. But you only know what isn't serving you once you've taken it apart in that first phase and looked at it all. And then once you've figured out, okay, so what parts of this are things that I have been unwilling to look at, to explore, discover, and so on. Now, we've done shadow work before in Soul Shift. What makes this year different? This year's shadow work is really focusing on the conscious, unconscious, and subconscious programs, belief systems. And where do those come from? Do they come from your early childhood? Do they come from your star system of origin? Do you not know the origin of some of the programs and beliefs that are kind of operating actively in your life? And what are those programs and beliefs? Do you really believe them? Sometimes we end up looking at these subconscious beliefs and programs and structures, and we realize that actually has no relevance for me. I don't know where that came from. It doesn't resonate with me. It's not supporting me. It's not in alignment with my highest good. So our work this year on the shadow isn't just so much focused on, oh, well, I'm angry, so I have to look at my shadow of anger. It's more like, what's the underlying program running my computer that has led me to manifest anger? Do you get where I'm going? This year's program is just a little bit deeper because we've been riding kind of up here, especially with things like shadow work. We've been kind of on the surface level a little bit, and now we have to get underneath and go, there's something bigger at play here. And once we acknowledge and articulate what the programs are, where they came from, and yes or no, is it serving, not serving, then we can really begin to understand how to operate the computer more effectively with programs, both conscious and subconscious, that are actually in alignment with your highest and best good. Here's an example of this. I was raised in a really fearful home. Okay. My mom was raised by a Christian minister. She just conformed to this idea that one was to be fearful of God. And ultimately, I think that led her to being kind of afraid of a lot in her life. My mom, didn't want us playing at school after school because terrible things could happen, or can't go here alone, or can't do this, or you shouldn't talk to that person, or when I was learning how to drive, it was like, don't drive past this street over here. This is a good neighborhood. This isn't. There was just a lot of constraints based around fear. Now, that was a program operating in my mom's life, and in certain places in her childhood, it actually served her. She had some scary experiences, and so what she learned about the world is it's a scary place, and at any moment, big scary things can jump out and get you. But what it led in her life was, or led her to, was there was almost a constant sense of like, at some point, the other shoe's going to drop. It's like, but you don't know when, and you don't know where, and you don't know why. And so it leads you to like living your life like this, where you're constantly in fight or flight. Well, that sort of got passed down because now she's raising children through this somewhat unconscious and subconscious programming. And so now here I am with the program, and it is not relevant to my life. I don't think I was meant to live a fearful life. And so I've had to spend part of my adulthood saying, what are these programs? Where did they come from? How? And then pulling it apart, like the necklace analogy with the knots, and going, this part of that story resonates, makes sense, is in support of my highest good. This other part of that story is irrelevant and is no longer serving me. So I'm going to choose to become aware of the programs running the computer, take this program out, debug it or whatever, and ultimately build a new operating system. And that's where it's all leading. So in conjunction, in the fourth stage, which is July, August, all the purified forms from the earlier stages, the better, higher vibrational programs, the clarity about who you are, and not just because you're somebody's mom or this person's sister or that person's partner, but just authentically who you are. You're going to know what's running the computer. You're going to know who you are separate from all of that. You're going to understand where you came from and all the purified forms. So you're going to have a golden basket, and you're going to put in that basket, okay, this is what I'm keeping, this is what I'm keeping, this is what I'm keeping. That creates, in alchemical terms, they call it the child of conjunction. That there's a conception that happens once you purify and cleanse and renew and rebirth all of your internal processes. And that child of conjunction becomes conceived and then takes on new life. And that child is basically a renewed iteration of you. And again, still at your same job, potentially, if you want to be, still in your relationship, still partnering and, parenting and doing all the things that you're doing. But do you start to see how the inner workings are shifting? That awareness is coming. And at this point in the curriculum, you may not necessarily see it manifesting outwardly. You may, but inwardly, there's a lot going on here. This is a furnace going here now. And you're like, I'm not doing that anymore. And then you start to see patterns, which is what ultimately happened to me in November of this year. Because I got underneath all the programming that was attached to the challenges that I was still experiencing 30 years later as an adult. And I finally started to see, okay, now I know. Because you can't put the necklace back on if it's still got the big knot in it. Then you're just wearing a knotted necklace. And that's what I was doing for a long time. I'm like, I'm just going to keep wearing this necklace. And maybe it's a little bit better, but it still had a big knot in the back, right? We want you wearing chains that are unknotted. In fermentation, which is the 5th stage, that child of conjunction begins to grow. New life emerges. You fall back in love with you again. And I'm telling you, it's the secret to everything. And I don't mean that in an egotistical sense, like, oh, I'm in love with me or whatever. It's just like, I think on some subconscious level, I thought maybe I deserved to be bullied when I was little. I don't exactly know why, but there had to have been part of me that agreed to this experience and this treatment. And unless and until I got to the point where I really understood that that was not the case, if that makes sense, I had to be liberated from that belief. And not just consciously me saying it to you, oh, I'm liberated, but like subconsciously, where on a deep level, I have engaged a different program. And that program is not supportive of the experiences that would be aligned to that pain anymore. And so you create a new energy around yourself that simply doesn't make space for or align to those experiences anymore. And that's where the external changes start to occur. The 6th stage, distillation, is really the breakthrough stage. And that's what I'm saying. For me, it was November. Our curriculum leads to all of this in November too, where you are now completely put back together from this new perspective, and you're looking out at the world through these new eyes. And it's almost a process of growing up again. You see the world differently, you see the world more clearly, and you also, and I believe for myself anyway, now that I understand this process and how it unfolds, I don't think I'm ever going to get trapped into some of these dysfunctional patterns ever again. And I've started to talk to my kids about this too, because what you learn is if you can process things through these stages, and it's going to take us a year to go through the whole curriculum, but after this, you'll kind of have your groove. You'll know how to do it. As soon as the trauma happens, as soon as the issue happens, you need to filter it through these stages. You shouldn't wait 30 flipping years like I did, right? But ultimately, I needed to go through the process, and maybe there was some reason why being stuck in that program for all those years was supportive of that, right? But the liberation and the freedom that comes from knowing that you're no longer at the mercy of those energies is incredible. Because when you're stuck in those programs, even if, so let's, I mean, I don't, I'm not 11 anymore. I'm not bullied by little kids on a schoolyard. But because I was still in that frequency with that programming, I would still attract sometimes people who would behave that way. And I just couldn't figure it out. And that's because it's not something to figure out. This isn't something to sort out or, do an analysis of. This is something that has to be untangled at the core essence of who you are. Because something in there is misaligned and it shows up in these repeated patterns in our life. Does that make sense? And that's what I'm saying. Your relationships at the end of the year should actually be better for this. And you'll even have your partner. I've had Dave and multiple people in my life say, just this year, like, wow, you approached that really differently, and I'm really proud of you. Wow, that would have really bothered you before. And it's like, it just didn't even have an impact. It's like a Teflon coating, but it's authentic. It's not that you're bypassing. I really want to make this point with you here. This is not a program in spiritual bypassing. This is the absolute opposite of a program in spiritual bypassing. Do you know what people get when they do a program in spiritual bypassing? It all looks good on the surface, but at the end of the day, they haven't healed. They're still angry at those same 5 people that they were angry at when they were 22, right? They still fall into the same traps and patterns. Really healed people are really healed. They're not carrying grudges, anger, wounds, projecting them. They can fully forgive and express compassion because they realize that ultimately the healing had to happen from them, to them, and through them. And it wasn't about the other person. When I see people who are still angry at people from the past and still resentful and still like, oh, I hate her and I don't, when I see that stuff, that's not a healed person to me. That's somebody who has not gotten under the hood of their car and taken the engine apart and said, why am I still stuck there? And all of a sudden they go, okay, now I get it. Through this process of examination and filtering and reconstruction and, and really beginning to get into not just the surface level, but what's driving the surface level, that's when the change occurs. And then the final stage is coagulation, which is stage 7, which will be December for us of the end of the year. The final stage, which is embodiment. This is living the transformation. Not just talking about it, not just writing about it, not just making a meme out of it, but fully embodying the change. And that's when this becomes, I use the phrase muscle memory, but that's when this becomes tacit awareness for you. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to decide if you want to do it. You don't have to, it just unfolds almost kind of naturally. And that's when you know you've gotten to the place where this process has been activated within you on a level that is beyond your conscious comprehension. And in my opinion, that's the goal. Because then this filtration system, this processing system, this alchemical system will just become part of who you are and what you do. And it'll become so intrinsic to you and second nature to you that you'll teach it by embodying it. You won't even have to teach people what the stages are. They're just going to, and you may even come up with your own language and words and nomenclature for this. You may come up with your own syntax and your own system, which I think is brilliant. My goal is always to inspire you, to give you sort of a leaping off point, and then from there where you take it, the sky's the limit. I hope that this relatively brief, this we've gone about an hour and 10 minutes. You know me, I can't ever do anything in just an hour. But I hope this has been a helpful introduction for you, just to, again, get your feet wet. Maybe it'll help you to spark some interesting questions that I can answer as we come closer to starting our work together. But I couldn't be any happier or more pleased that you are here. Welcome to Alchemy, and welcome to your transformation. My goal is that at the end of this year, some part of you is reborn in a way that maybe you really didn't think was possible after all these years. Really? Am I really going to be able to do this now? And the answer is yes. And hopefully hearing a little bit about my story and my experience this year and my process inspires you, because the only limitation here is you, your faith and your trust in the process. And I have all the faith in you. I know you're ready. There's a reason that you're here. So welcome. I look forward to getting started soon. And thank you so much for watching Intro to Alchemy. I'll see you in class.